Welcome to the Storied Motherhood Book Club. Storied Motherhood is a book club of mothers reading stories together while living out our own. Storied Motherhood is an Instagram-based book club with 3 hosts, Ashley at This Joy-Filled House, Amelia at Brave Little Learners, and Jackie over at These Slow Days. Our book club read for September of 2022 was Mothering by the Book by Jennifer Pepito. It was a wonderful book that our club really enjoyed, and Ashley actually got to sit down and do an Instagram live with Jennifer to just chat and glean more wisdom from her. So this is that interview, and I hope you guys enjoy it and have so much encouragement from it, just like we did.
Hi, I am live now. Okay, so we have a wonderful guest today that is going to talk to us about her book that we've been reading in our Mom's Book Club Friday book. Friday. Amelia, Jackie, would you drop our hashtag down there for us? That would be fabulous. We're here. We're so excited. In just a second, I'm going to go ahead and invite her. Jennifer Pepito, Mothering by the Book, is our guest today, and I'm so excited. I cannot believe how excited I am. So we have some questions for her from our book club, and I cannot wait. Hi!
Hi! How are you?
Oh, good. This is like the first time I've invited somebody, so I'm like, what button do I push?
You did it. You did it. And I see Rebecca, my publicist, is here, so that's really fun. Hi, Rebecca.
That's so awesome. So do you want to go ahead and give yourself a little short introduction? Obviously, you wrote the book that we're reading in our club. We have almost 80 people in our club now who are just poring over your book. It has been such wonderful conversations. We are just beyond excited that you're doing this with us.
Oh my goodness, this is so fun. I've been really, really delighted and honored by the response to the book. It was really sweet. I mean, it was a sweet writing it was like journaling out my life, and in a way it was a gift to my family, to my children, and so having it have such a sweet reception, and obviously I wanted younger moms to see themselves in me so that they could have more joy. And we had amazing times. We sat by creeks and read out loud and did all these amazing adventures, but there are moments that I just wish I could have done over, and I hope that you guys get to get a glimpse of that and say, I'm going to do things differently myself. So I'm the mom of 7 children, and I have been homeschooling for 25 years, and I love homeschooling. I create resources for the Peaceful Press, and a lot of the books that are in Mothering by the Book are books that we've read out loud as we've done our Peaceful Press resources. So that's been so much fun to, be able to share lessons that a lot of the moms in our community have already learned as they've been reading these books.
That's so fun, and we are so thankful. I know Peaceful Press is prolific in our group too, so I love that we get to see kind of you sprinkled throughout start to finish in our day. We open our day with reading your book, and then we go through our day with your curriculum too, and it's fun just kind of have your presence with us as you're like our guide through early motherhood here. And some of us do have older kids too, so it's been fun seeing how it applies to different age groups and single moms versus working moms versus stay-at-home moms, and it's been wonderful. It's been absolutely wonderful. So that actually brings me to our first question. I printed it out so I can stay on track because I'll just gab.
Which is fine too. That's great.
So our first question here is, what inspired you to write curriculum and start Peaceful Press?
Yeah, I have been, like I said, I've been homeschooling for a long time, and I had read about Charlotte Mason and classical. And so what we were doing in our home at first was doing some math and grammar, and then also using something like Story of the World or Mystery of History. Mm-hmm. But I came to a point where I was like, these are boring compared to reading good literature. And because I'm reading these, I'm not reading good literature because this is taking up our whole morning time. So I started with my own children, just, looking for literature. I would look at book lists and find the literature that kind of taught the time period or the stories I wanted to teach my kids. And so it was easy transition then to create that resource for the Peaceful Press families, just the books that I'd already been reading to my kids, the projects that we did, the baking that we did, all of the enjoyable experiences. Because you think about like, I love the Charlotte Mason method. That is the method I most adhere to. But I do feel like the handcrafts are almost too nebulous. Like, either you do these things that they were doing in the 1800s, or you have to come up with it all yourself. So
Yeah.
having incorporated things like, a new recipe every week that families can try together, so that you're gaining skills in making, elderberry syrup or baking bread, or some of these things that are great for the family anyhow, was so fun. And then the Peaceful Preschool was actually the first resource I created. And that was partly because I have a daughter with special needs, and a lot of what she did in occupational therapy and in her neurodevelopmental therapy was this fine motor work, crawling, creeping on the floor. And I realized that so many homeschool moms, like, we don't know about child development. We're just moms. I mean, some of you do. I love it that there's occupational therapists using the curriculum, and there's physical therapists using the curriculum. But a lot of us, that wasn't our background. And all of a sudden we're having to teach kids, and kids now are so often on devices. They're just like swipe, 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 or they're sucking their food out of little pouches. So they're actually missing a lot of the development that they need to be able to hold a pencil and track words on a page. And in the Peaceful Preschool and the Nourishing Nature Kindergarten, I included all those motor skills that are actually more important in the early years than the phonics and counting. In the early years, it's more important that you do all those motor skills things. If you're only going to choose a couple things out of my resources, choose the motor skills work, because that is more important for your child's academic learning than knowing their ABCs by 3 or something.
Yes, that's something we do too. We do slow learning and slow start, and we don't really push. And I say push lightly because it's like an hour or two max a day of actual school until they're like 7, 8, 9.
Yeah. And I think it's reasonable, because the academics will come fast when your child is ready. But if you don't do the background work, and especially because our culture just has less, it's harder and harder for us to have our children play in dirt and play in sand and all these things that are actually so good for their sensory motor development. And so, and I think just as moms, we're just busy. Like, I love the idea of the quiet growing time. But, for us as moms in a modern culture, if we're busy, that might mean our young children aren't getting this. They're not in a nursery with the governance, with everything child friendly, So I think that having just some tips, like, you don't have to use those early childhood guides like Nourishing Nature or Peaceful Preschool as like a rule book. You could just pick and choose some things, but just having some ideas when we're busy trying to get laundry done and get food on the table and homeschool these other kids is important.
Yeah, well, and that kind of brings me smoothly to our next question. You're really good at this. If you had to pick one, read aloud, what would it be? That's an impossible question, I know.
No, I mean, honestly, I know there's mixed feelings in our modern age about the Little House on the Prairie series, but it's just such a very detailed look at the daily life of a pioneer family. And so I think it's so engaging for us as women trying to care for a home, trying to, some of us have moved, some of us might be like dabbling in homesteading. And so if there was just one read aloud, I feel like there are so many beautiful lessons in there about overcoming fear. I mean, Ma's prejudice are unfortunate. And for us now, we know better. Right. But seeing her fear is so revealing to us, because what is it that we're afraid of today? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I think that we could either judge her and then not listen to her, or we could learn from her. And that's what history is supposed to do, is help us to learn. Yes. But I do love just all the little lessons in the ways they made a home, the ways they helped each other, the ways that they overcame a new hardship. There's just, I feel like our kids pick up on so much, and it's so detailed and so descriptive that it's just a beautiful series if you're going to read one series in your childhood's life.
Yes, we love it. We love it. Hope my boys will be receptive reading this.
Yeah. And if I think the other one that I really love is the Little Britches series by Ralph Moody. So if you need a boy, like, especially for those older boys, that one is just so engaging as well. It's a little bit, maybe not as young child friendly. The stories are maybe a little more detailed, or the lessons are a little bit more detailed, but they're such beautiful character books, just the way that he made mistakes and had to overcome, and was always looking for a mentor or looking for how he could do better in his life situations.
I love that. I cannot wait to start reading The Little House on the Prairie. Do you have like an age range that you would recommend starting? Because I have a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and we are, I feel like, just now getting into where they're really loving those read alouds.
Yeah, you know, a lot of families did the Playful Pioneers, which is our Little House on the Prairie resource for kindergarten or first grade. I think the most ideal age for doing the Playful Pioneers, which is Little House and all the accompanying fun activities like shaking butter and dyeing hankies and things like that, is maybe like 7 to 10. But families have used it earlier and younger. So I think, you know, the Little House on the Little House on the Prairie series, I mean, kids as young as 5 or 6 could probably be engaged with it. But when you get maybe 7 to 10, they're going to like dress up and they're going to go build a log cabin and they're going to cook over a wood stove. You know what I mean? It just makes the experience so much richer even.
Yeah, it's such a sweet age. I'm really looking forward to when they really like start living the stories for themselves.
Yes, yeah, it's a beautiful season, and it's not super long, so.
I don't do enough fun things like shaking. But you know what? Me too. We are in a season of just survival. We have so many family accidents and big medical problems happen. And just the last week, we're just like, we're just going to do 3 subjects a day and we'll be fine.
Yeah, and that totally is fine. I think that's really important. Like if you are in a season as a mom where you can't do everything, first do reading aloud, because reading aloud, it provides the vocabulary, it provides the pictures, the imagination, the creativity. So first reading aloud, next do a little bit of writing, even if it's just copying a sentence or just playing a game with words, or you as mom dictating a sentence from the book and having them copy it. And then third, do a little bit of math. It's like, you know, especially if you think about education, you could do, you know, a year of grammar. Julie Bogart says a year of grammar in the elementary years and a year in junior high, and then as a foreign language in high school. With like, I recommend doing maybe alternating a year of writing, a year of grammar. In the first grade through third grade years, it should be mostly just copy work, spelling, and phonics. So I think that, you know, definitely it's better to pace yourself and then have some time to enjoy the season. Like even in a difficult season, it might be better for you to just bake cookies with the kids than try to make them do some schoolwork. And they could still learn things. They could be helping you mix things or reading the recipe or doing things, but there might be a better family atmosphere from that than trying to get them to do schoolwork while you're so stressed about an external situation.
Yeah, I read somewhere that kids don't pick up on big events as trauma until you as a mom are processing it negatively in the home. So
right.
Think through the things that Ma went through, but if you have, you know, a positive attitude about it, and I know it's hard to have a positive attitude all the time, but generally you keep the atmosphere of your home a sacred space and close, then it helps your kids not have to go through some of those things. It doesn't log as trauma to them. It's just, hey,
I love that. And I think that's why, you know, in the book, I talk in one chapter about singing, because sometimes as moms, we are just so discouraged or so consumed that that's all we can do is sing. Because, you know, we're so up in our heads that we can't get our thoughts out, or we can't turn it off. You know what I mean? But if I start singing, everything turns off. You know what I mean? It totally changes the atmosphere. And so, you know, sometimes I'm so busy I forget to turn music on, but I have an older daughter living at home and she'll turn worship music on, and it immediately changes the atmosphere of the home. So I think, you know, there are things that we can do even in a hard season, singing with our kids, reading together, that can, like you say, lighten the atmosphere and somewhat protect our children from the trauma of what we're going through. And we're all going through stuff right now.
Oh yeah, there's something in the air for sure. Yeah, do you have first, I guess I'm skipping a question here. If you could give yourself one piece of advice as a new mom, what would it be?
Yeah, I think it would be really to start to savor and be present with what is going on in your life. Because, it's so easy to be like, oh, will my child ever walk? And then you get all anxious. Or will my child ever stop stop peeing their diapers? Or, I mean, there's all these things that we fret about and think too much in the future about. And a lot of it is going to work itself out. Even like our homes. I don't know about you guys, but I spent a lot of time in my head complaining about my home, thinking about the inadequacy of my home, whichever home it was, really comparing my home to others. And in the grand scheme of things, like the home that I was complaining about, it was clean. It had, walls that weren't like, there was nothing wrong with it. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't as beautifully decorated like Restoration Hardware or something as maybe one of my friends, but there's nothing wrong with this home. And I just spent a lot of time obsessing about it. And it's so stupid. Do you know what I mean? And we do the same thing as mothers about our bodies, about our clothes, about what other people are doing. And it steals so much joy. But if we could just like be present, like, oh my gosh, these kids are going to grow up so fast and then they'll be gone. Like I've got kids right now living all over the place. And so that season of us all being in the house together and us all sitting around the table together and morning time all together, it's over for me. And it went fast. And I have 7 kids. So I just feel like just be present in the day that you have. I mean, I love the Bible says, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will take care of itself. And so just like learning to be aware of, oh my gosh, I have flowers in my garden, or wow, there is a meal on the table, or my husband earned money enough to pay the rent today. Like, every day just starting to be more thankful and more present in what is good about that day, instead of being so worried about really non-essentials, things that are wood, hay, and stubble and will burn up in the end.
Yes. I was reading same book, I think, how your brain is hardwired. You can hardwire your own brain. So the more you practice something, the more negative you are, the more I hate this. I don't like this about my body. I don't like this about my house. It's wearing a path in your synapses and changing the actual planes of your brain.
Absolutely.
So with the positive, if you're in that, I'm in that mode where I'm just like, oh, my back porch is dirty. I can't catch up on laundry. The dishes are always done. I don't ever get help. And if I start turning those thoughts and say, is that true? Is that how I feel? And then I start saying, okay, here's the positive. Here's the positive. Here's the positive. Yeah. 30 days had a family dinner. That means we got to be together. That means I didn't have time to clean them because we were together and having fun, and just wearing those positive pathways in between our synapses is just.
Yeah. I love that you're doing that research, because it is like, it's so easy for us to just give way to our thoughts. Do you know what I mean? To just like, not really pay attention to the thoughts that are coming in our head and sort of let them I think I described in the book of like being the devil's rag doll. Do you know what I mean? Just like whatever the enemy was saying to me, I'm just like, okay, I guess, yes, my life is terrible. How sad for me, poor me, etc. But instead we could, do what you're talking about and just retrain our brain to find beauty and to find joy, to be thankful. And it doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge the pain we've been through. I just led a Pride and Prejudice book club last night talking about the importance of journaling through trauma. Yeah. And so it's not that we just always push ahead and don't give ourselves a moment to cry. But I think that the problem is if we push ahead and don't give ourselves a moment to cry, we do become those complaining victims that are constantly disappointed in our lives. Whereas if we can take a moment, process what happened, whether we write about it, cry about it, whatever, then we can go on and discipline our mind to say, look at all the goodness that I have in my life today.
Yes, it's when we get mired, when we wallow in that feeling and allow ourselves to stay still and stay there in those feelings rather than processing them, getting help if you can't find that if you find you can't process them, talking to people, all of that, journaling.
Yeah, and I'm reading, there's so many sweet comments. Thank you. And the bungalow on Bennett says that she was reading 1,000 Gifts while she was reading my book. And that I quote 1,000 Gifts in my book because when I was living in Mexico, I had a lot of reasons to feel sorry for myself. I mean, I was living a much harder life than any of my friends, at least not my friends in Mexico, but my friends in the United States. And so it was easy for me to just give way to unthankfulness and feel like a victim. But when I started, following Ann Voskamp's advice to just start to notice and be thankful for the little things, it all changed, because there always is something good in our lives, even in the hardest of circumstances. And I've seen, loved ones go through bankruptcy, go through the loss of everything, go through struggles with children, go through just so many hardships, but there's always some way that God is showing his love for us. And I think it's just such a gift to him when we acknowledge that.
Yes, I love that. It's like it's a sacrifice, a holy sacrifice to him. Ignore what we could feel that is rightful for us, but it's much better when we turn it around to. Yeah. On that note, do you have some first steps for a mom just starting on their journey to seek beauty?
Yeah, in some ways, the steps in my book are in a way sequential for what is important for finding beauty and getting through this, because I feel like there is a path. Like if we, good habits are one of the steps to finding beauty. Sometimes it's just having the habit of doing the right thing, even if you don't feel like it. Taking our thoughts captive is one of those steps to be able to find beauty. Learning how to imagine the best instead of imagining the worst. Having a family vision is another one of those steps to finding beauty, because it helps us get rid of comparison and start living by the vision that God's given us. But I really do think, forgiveness and grieving are almost the very first steps, because if we don't forgive our parents or forgive our husband, whatever whoever the person is that we're holding a grudge toward and feeling victimized by, if we don't start with forgiveness and with maybe even before that acknowledging the pain we've been through, it's going to be hard for us to have the power to take our thoughts captive and have good habits, because what we're identifying as is a victim, and as long as we identify as a victim, then we don't have the agency to love our lives, to enjoy our children, to be thankful, to have a vision. But when we can grieve whatever happened to us, because something has happened to all of us, and learn to forgive the people who perpetrated against us, just like the Lord's Prayer says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. When we can do those two first steps, then all the other things, it's like almost like we get a fresh, like a clean slate. The Bible says if you don't have faith as a child, you won't enter the kingdom. And I think that's what happens when we get rid of that victim mentality and just forgive. It's like we have this childlike faith again, where we're excited about new opportunities. We're not afraid that we're going to mess things up in the way that somebody else messed things up. It's this whole new way of looking at life that does bring so much more joy and experimentation in a healthy way and creativity. It's like we can start drawing with our children, and maybe we're not going to be the best artists, but we're going to have fun trying. Yeah. We can start arranging flowers or gardening or whatever those things are that you were afraid to do. Because you've taken the time to cut off the past, you can start doing the future with creativity and joy and a sense of whimsy.
Yes, I love that. I love sense of whimsy. I loved also the word agency. It's such a good word. And I wish I had like a computer to pull up the actual definition. So if you get a chance, people who are watching, look up the definition of agency. It is so compelling and driving. It gives you so much power behind choices. I love the word.
It's so important, especially as wives. Like I spent a lot of time in my marriage feeling irritated that my husband wasn't anticipating my needs. But I'm an adult. Like I'm not a baby. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes we're acting like these little children where we're waiting for someone else to take care of us, but we're not children, we're adults. And so if there's if there's somewhere in your childhood that you didn't feel loved and you need to maybe ask God to comfort that time, that's one thing. But I think learning how to, I feel overworked. I'm going to either embrace the fact that this is an exhausting season of my life, or I'm going to hire some help, or I'm going to ask my husband to help. You know what I mean? Like there are things we can do.
Yes.
And sometimes there's not much. Sometimes it's just like, this is the life, this is the path that we're on. This is hard. But even in that season, recognizing, we talked about this at the Pride and Prejudice book club last night. Like I have friends who, say they want goats, right? Their husband doesn't want goats, but they want goats. And then they're mad at their husband for not helping them with the goats, but it was their choice. So you either enjoy taking care of the goats on your own, or you get rid of the goats. Like you're the adult here, but you can't blame somebody else for not wanting to do your thing. You know what I mean? So I think learning how to be adults and make adult decisions in a way about our lives is important. It's important modeling for our children too.
Yeah, I think that's such a good conversation when it comes to a big, I guess, catchphrase or a big thing is finding your mom tribe, finding your people, finding your culture around you, finding those moms that can lock arms with you. What, I can't find anybody. There's nobody here. Have you tried? Have you looked for people? We live in Texas, and there's a lot of transplants right now, a lot of political refugees, a lot of real refugees, a lot of everybody is just moving to Texas. I live in a tiny town outside of East Texas and Tyler, and we get a new homeschool parent every week.
Wow.
At minimum. And so I just went on Facebook and I started collecting people. Like, no, sorry, you're my friend. You're my friend now. You matter. And it took a lot. I was the mom who was like, there's no people around. I showed up at the library like once this month and there was no homeschoolers. Oh man. But it took a lot of hard lessons to be like, no, you have to go out and seek them. It doesn't matter what you feel about that. It doesn't matter that it feels unfair, that it's not easier. You have to be the one to drive that. You have to have the agency to go find those people and seek them out.
Yeah. And I think it's so helpful to have a community like,
yeah.
You know, because I have my sisters, my sister, my blood sisters and my homeschool sisters who I'm watching the way they live and I'm inspired by the way they live. I'm, you know, we're speaking life to each other. Like if we see each other, you know, being messy, we're there to like, okay, how can we help you? But also, hey, maybe you want to think about this, you know? So it's a really special thing to find a community of women to run with who can help you be like, you know, the moms that I'm in community with, they are amazing. Like taking care of the homes, taking care of their children, loving their husbands, loving God with so much intentionality that it's just like, how could you do anything differently? And moms like us, like, I don't know if any of you were at the Wild and Free conference. I believe that what we're doing is saving the world. I mean, it is there's so many things that are a mess right now, but these simple practices of having dinner around the table, it almost guarantees that your children are not going to be drug addicts. These simple practices of taking care of a garden, it means that there's biodiversity that continues. All of these little simple things we're doing, like it might look crazy, it might even look scary right now, but what we're doing, one way or the other, we're either the virgins with our lamps full and ready for our king, or we're the monks in the monasteries rescuing civilization. One way or the other, what we're doing is powerful.
Yes, and it's almost too simple in some ways. Like you said, having dinner with your family is like guaranteed to make sure that they aren't drug addicts. That feels too simple to me. I feel like I should be trying, you know, having the conversation. I grew up in the DARE era. Like, we need to do all these things. We need to have an education. They need to know all these things. And I need to make sure they're around the right people and not around other people. But it's really just that simple. Just have dinner. Just provide. Yeah. It doesn't have to be fancy. It just is dinner.
Yeah. It's simple things that are actually really countercultural right now and have the potential to save culture.
Yeah, I love it. So do you have maybe some advanced steps for when it's just really hard to seek out beauty? We kind of touched on this a little bit, but you know, when it feels like the world's coming down on you, is there something that you turn to that just helps bring you back into remembering to seek beauty?
Yeah. You know, when I was living in Mexico, I'm probably at my lowest. I read a book by John Piper called When the Darkness Will Not Lift. It was just a small book about depression. But in that book, he quotes that George MacDonald quote that I have in Mothering by the Book about, you know, if you don't know what to do, just pick up a broom and sweep the room, you know. And I think that, you know, really that is powerful. Just those little simple things like, okay, I'm feeling so down. I'm feeling helpless. It feels like everything's falling apart, but I'm going to just be faithful. And the verse that's been really speaking to me is this verse, trust in the Lord and do good, and so shalt thou dwell on the land and feed on his faithfulness. It's in Psalm 37, I think. And so there's just, when we are faithful, the fruit will eventually come. Like we might not see it tomorrow. We might not see it today, but eventually we'll start to feel better when we just start putting a smile on our face and reading a book to our children and singing a song. When we just clean up the kitchen and make one area of our lives less chaotic, then things will get better. And it might, like I said, it might not be instant, but these simple things will make life more hopeful and more like kind of functional with just some simple things.
I love that. I love the simplicity of just pick up a broom. I can pick up a broom.
Right.
It's so simple.
Yeah, just making one little area of your life more orderly can sort of start to change the whole atmosphere. And I think, you know, you look at that in organization wisdom, you look at that in financial wisdom. It's always just doing the simplest thing first, you know, paying off the smallest bill first, cleaning the smallest area first. But once we get that ball rolling, then it can lead to better, more success.
Yes, you guys are so sweet with all of your comments. I'm seeing all of them. I promise we're not ignoring them.
Yeah.
That's kind of a saying in our house, is just we get overwhelmed with messes really, really easily. We're all neurodivergent in our house. So messes are physical weights in our brains. And so having a messy room, that's usually grounds for major meltdowns. And so we start with your clean corner. Just push it away from a corner, and it's like magic. It's like, okay, I have breathing room. I have physical breathing room because I have this one clean corner, and that works so well with the sweeping method.
Right. And I have to say too, I was talking to my sister about one of my kids being sick with a cold, and that this child seems to be getting sick a lot. And she's like, okay, what you need to do is turn off the devices and go outside barefoot. And I think that's really good advice for all of us moms too. Like, I think, you know, it's so easy when life is overwhelming and our kids are overwhelming to just escape onto our phones, but it's actually probably the least good thing for our brains. And so, just throw your phone in a drawer and go outside and walk around barefoot and sit in the sun for a minute, come back in and organize an area, and everything will feel better. But as long as we're like on our phones looking at how everyone else's house is cleaner, or they do better reels, or whatever it is, it's going to be hard to break out of that funk.
Yeah, especially with how instant Instagram and TikTok is, and all their homes are just spotless. It gets overwhelming, really.
Yeah, at least that is one thing I think is funny about Instagram now. Like, when I first was on Instagram, there was all these beautiful flat lays and beautiful homes, right? So then the pressure was on to homeschool better. But now it's just moms drinking coffee and doing like a boomerang. So it's like, whatever, it doesn't matter anymore anyhow. So.
I think we've all up together and we're like, you know what? We're just going to be done now.
We're just going to go outside barefoot.
Yeah, this is actually better. Let's all just collectively this. Absolutely.
You know, one of the things was just starting to write down a thankful list. You know, I just started writing down something every day, a couple things every day. The planner that I sell on Amazon has a space to write something I'm thankful for every week, because I think just starting to notice, it wasn't necessarily that I stopped complaining. It was that I started being thankful. I started noticing the good, you know, really turning my attention. But also I really have been working on my imagination, because I realized when I start worrying about my kids, I can start to imagine these crazy scenarios, like, oh, you know, they're driving somewhere and then they'll probably get in an accident, and if the phone rings, it'll probably be the police calling. Do you know what I mean? It's like we really can use our imagination for such evil. But I started thinking about that. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna, because I think as Christians sometimes we're like, ooh, imagination, visualization, that's weird, that's new age. But really, I started actually imagining good things for my kids. Yes. It's like, even the Bible says, it's like, eye has not seen nor ear has heard what God has in store for those who love him. So there's something good in the future for us. And so really, and like, I never realized, I never kind of thought about, ooh, these pictures in my imagination are probably from the devil. This is not like, why am I imagining such terrible things? That's not from God for sure, because God says he has good plans. I have a future and a hope for you. So recognizing that, then I started to just change the pictures in my head, because it's not always words. Sometimes it's these pictures that we're imagining. And so I started, I'm just going to imagine my child driving really safely to work and having good friends and making good decisions. You know, mine are older, but for your little ones, I'm going to imagine my child on the trampoline and they're going to jump and laugh and have fun and get off safely. You know, we're not going to imagine the worst anymore.
They will not fall and break their arm. It will be fine.
Mm-hmm.
That, I think, I personally have a very vast imagination. And as a kid, that would be, kind of a detriment. Every shadow suddenly is something out to get you in the middle of the night. But as I've grown up and had children, and obviously have had many of those, so I didn't know that grass could carry leprosy.
I'd never heard of that either.
Armadillos carry leprosy, and if they crawl through your grass, they're unlocked.
I mean, that is something we maybe don't need to know.
Pretend that didn't happen.
I'm gonna forget that.
But instead, it's like, okay, I have such a powerful imagination that way. Surely I have one this way, and that's kind of, I had, I wish I remember the quote. There was a quote from somebody at some point in time who equated faithful and faith to imagination, and faith is the imagination of the heart or the soul or something like that.
Yeah.
I thought it was just such a wonderful tie into a profound and immediate way. You can say, okay, but God.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
God.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, there's a verse, I can't remember it exactly, but it's like faith is the maybe manifestation of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen.
Yes.
I think, it's like you look at I talk about this in the book. The spies had to go into the land and they had to kind of figure out if it was a good place or a bad place. And some of them used their imaginations to describe it. They saw some things. They both saw some things, but some of them used their imagination to make it seem horrifying. And the other ones use their imagination to make it seem amazing. So I think that, our imagination can be used for good or evil, and just being aware of that is so important for creating a better life for our children, for creating a more peaceful home, because a lot of our fears do just come from imagining the worst about the future.
Yes. Yes, this will be available later, guys. So if you need to go, totally understand. So that kind of brings me to, do you have a favorite part of your own book? Do you have one that your heart?
It was so much fun to write that book. It was so lovely. But I think that if there's one chapter or one idea that I think is the most important, it's probably the chapter on the endurance and forgiveness. Because for one thing, the book Endurance it showed me so much about leadership. Like, I think because of all kinds of cultural things, as mothers, we've been given this idea that we shouldn't lead our children, that we should just let them make their own decisions, or we should give them choices about everything. And I actually think that creates a lot of fear in our kids, because they're little and they should know that there's somebody, just like we get comfort from knowing God is in control. Our children should have some comfort in knowing that their parents are watching out for them. But we've had this bad parenting teaching that says, oh, let your children make choices about everything and be egalitarian. And I think that's actually really hard for people to live under a complete lack of leadership, especially children. And I feel like in the kids that I sort of dabbled in that more too many choices parenting, they've struggled more with fear. And I'm not saying that children should have no choices. Like, I 100% believe that we have to be honoring and respectful and aware of our children and their development. But I think that when we don't offer any leadership, it really does hinder the growth of our home, because we can be moving towards something better, or it can just be chaos.
Right.
And so I think, just seeing that picture of how Shackleton led his men to safety, they would have all died. If he had not been a good leader, they would have all died. There's no way that they could have just made egalitarian decisions and survived what they were going through. Somebody had to lead. And obviously we want it to be God leading, because it is, I think we're also suspicious of leaders. Like, there's been so many bad leaders. And so it's really hard for us to get kind of a grip on the idea of order or authority or things like that. But I think, God gave us our children. There's really clear direction, like train up your child in the way he should go, or teach your children diligently. So there isn't really a biblical mandate that says, just let your children grow up like wild arrows or whatever. Yeah. So, I think, obviously this is going to look different in every family. And I'm very hesitant to offer parenting advice, because I feel like until I have grandchildren or maybe great grandchildren, there's so much that can happen in a person's life. But I just feel like leadership is important for children. And so that chapter on forgiveness and leadership is probably a favorite, or maybe one I feel is most important.
Yes, that was one of my favorite too, I have to say. I mean, the whole book is pretty much my favorite part. So,
Oh, thank you.
the conversations we have had in the group are impressive and deep and sweet and thoughtful. And you've changed, I would say, everyone's lives who has picked up your book in our group. It's been just an honor and a blessing to get to journey through your book, your guidance with our young families all together as this collective mom tribe through Instagram. Who would have known? Who would have known?
Yeah. How it's so special.
Do you have a particular verse right now that you are just in love with?
Yes, and I know I obviously already said it maybe a couple times today, but trust in the Lord and do good, and so shall thou dwell in the land and feed on his faithfulness. And that's part of Psalm 37, which the whole thing was really comforting to me. It actually says, yet a little while and the wicked will be no more, but the meek will inherit the earth and delight themselves in the abundance of peace. And I think that's just so important, that we don't have to fear what's happening in the world. We don't have to fear the wicked. We don't have to fear anything, because God's going to take care of them. What we can do is trust in the Lord and do good. And so shall we dwell in the land and feed on his faithfulness.
Okay, so kind of switching gears, I guess, a little bit. These are some of our questions from our group itself. Do you have a practice or a specific way you reflect on books you read? And this is from the person who wrote the question. I feel like you get so much more out of fiction than the questioner often does. I'm wondering how you developed your habit of reflection on life application.
I think because I've been reading out loud to my children, it causes me to slow down. Like, I'm a really fast reader. And so the books I'm reading to myself, I'm not necessarily listening to as deeply. Mm-hmm. But when I'm reading aloud to my children, I'm thinking about the lessons I want them to take from it. I'm having to reflect on it in different ways. So I really do think that has been very formative. But I have a commonplace book. I write notes in my phone of quotes. I have book darts. So like, I'm writing another book right now, and I have, a stack probably 10 books high of pages with book darts on them that I want to use later. So mm-hmm. I think that, I love the way books shape us. I think it's really important to note. And so taking time, like I have a notebook around here somewhere where, part of the Peaceful Press is that we do our schooling with notebooking, where we read a book and then we write about that. And so I'll do that with my kids. If I just did a read aloud with them, I'll write down a quote, or I will write down something that I took from the book as well, partly to model it for them, but partly for my own. Like, I want to keep growing as well.
Yeah. I love that. That was a practice that we started. I'm homeschooled. I was homeschooled too.
Oh, I love that.
So that was something that I saw modeled with my mom. We kept what was called a quote book at the time, because In Vogue was not the common book yet. But quotes of everything we were reading, and we would often share them at the dinner table together. And it was just, I still have mine. My mom had made her own, and it's actually like, hers is now typed. Hers is like, it should be a dictionary of best quotes ever.
Oh man, I would love to read your mother's book. And one thing I did learn is when you're writing notes in your commonplace book, write down the page number.
Yes.
Because when you're trying to write a book later and you have to reference page numbers, it's kind of important.
Where is this?
Exactly.
I've seen they'll get those sticky notes on the sides, and then put them off so that the book can go back in. And then it's just right there. You can see all the colors of where all of their quotes are in the book.
Who'd you learn that from? That's amazing.
I read a lot of books, and I follow a lot of people on Instagram.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I hope you all heard that. Basically, tag your books, not with book darts, but the little sticky notes, and then cut them off, and then you'll be able to find it later. So smart. Yeah.
Like color coded by inspirational or motherhood or biblical or parents.
Wow.
Just, her system was fabulous, and I aspire to be that.
Yeah. And I actually just shared, James Clear is the author of Atomic Habits. Mm-hmm. And I just shared a little post by him where he talked about how he reads a book, and he actually does the same thing. He types up notes after he's finished reading it. So I think that, I know it's hard to find time, especially when your kids are little, mm-hmm. but if you just start to get in the habit of even writing one quote with the page number, it's going to really add up. And I also have like one of those literary journals where you can write the book you read and give it stars. And even on my Instagram, each month for the last 6 months or so, I've been posting the books I read that month and what I took from them. So I think it's just however you can journal what you've read, because it is like a journal of our personal growth, of our intellectual development, our mother culture. It's really important.
Yes. And then I feel like when you write it down and then when you talk about it and share it, that's when it really logs in. That's when you feel, when you teach it, that's when it's been the best.
Which I think is important for us to realize as home educators. Like, it's not that our children filled out a workbook page. It's that they read a book and they talked about it, it became their own. So I think that could simplify our homeschooling so much if we just get a hold of that.
Oh, yes. I think that's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
But if now we can get past the fit throwing about having to actually write,
right,
then we'll be golden.
Yes.
Okay. You talk about feeling like a leaky bucket that could never be filled up as a child. I have a 6-year-old daughter that seems that way to me. Do you have any idea what would have been helpful to you as a child?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it definitely was because I was molested, and I think, many people have gone through that. And I think what that spoke to me, it wasn't like it was a one-time event. It wasn't extended. It wasn't somebody trusted. But I think what that spoke to me is that nobody was watching me, that I was, and so there's a sense of abandonment that I took on, or a sense of neglect that I took on because of that. And then it made it hard for me to receive love.
Right.
Now, for this woman's daughter, I doubt that's the case. But I think that when you see a chip on a child's shoulder, or a child who's whiny a lot, I think it is important to pause your life a little bit and go after that. Right. Because those, like a chip on a child's shoulder or a whiny child, it might seem like a small thing and you're just going to discipline or something. But those are the kinds of things that lead to really, I think, reprobate behaviors, or really dysfunctional behaviors. It's those little things in childhood that are not dealt with. So, like with our children, we've actually, we've asked them, hey, ask Jesus to show you when feeling this started for you. And I don't know, I mean, sometimes a 6-year-old could think or pray like that. Sometimes they couldn't. But, when we've prayed this with our children, some of the things that cause bigger problems later in life were actually really small things. But taking time, like even with this child, maybe just to talk to her and say, hey, I noticed you're feeling sad lately. Is something going on? Or kind of observing the interactions. Like maybe there's an older sibling who's bullying them a little bit. Like I've noticed there's one family I can think of where one child looks like the good child and one child looks like the bad child. But the child who looks like the good child is constantly tattletaling on the other one and somewhat bullying. And so I could see the next child starting to get a little chip on her shoulder, or starting to almost be a little bit naughty, but part of it is just the way that she's being treated by an older child, and the way that older child is getting kudos for being the good child, even though she's kind of a wretched little tattletale. Yeah. And I think the movie Fred Claus is actually very, it's a silly movie. It's a Christmas movie. It's silly, but it actually highlights this in a way, because so often there's some little thing in childhood where a child decides they're not loved or they're not cared for, that becomes big problems later on.
Yes.
And if we can figure out what that is in childhood, instead of just trying to like cover it with discipline or cover it with good behavior, I think that we get a lot more functional adult children if we've dealt with it right early.
Yes. I love that advice. I have a middle child who is pretty morose at times, and pity me, I'm the middle child who always gets picked last. And some of that is just, he chose to look at it that way. It wasn't, you can't be strictly fair every time. It's getting to know his love language and really pouring into that, and really deschooling some of his thought as he's grown up. Just in the last year, we've done a lot of work on having one-on-one dates. We figured out that intentional time, service were his two things. And so when he does ask for help, and it seems like you know how to get dressed, you're 6 years old, but doing it anyway and saying, I'm so glad I get to spend this time with you, and getting to recognize that what seems like listen, you know how to dress yourself, is really him asking for that face-to-face, intentional, loving time with him, and beginning to recognize that. We're beginning to see the benefits of that now a year later, just working and working and working on that.
Yeah, I love that you're recognizing that. It's so precious because, I mean, I think sometimes our middle kids and maybe even especially middle boys can get the short end of the stick.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like one of my kids there was almost a little bit of an attachment disorder because just the life we were living and the placement, but not being well attached can contribute to a lot of immature behaviors. And so I know it's hard. I know we're pressed as moms. And so it can be hard to like take time to pay attention to a middle child when we're worried about homeschooling the older one and taking care of the infants. But each one of them is an important person in our homes. And so whatever we can do to simplify our lives so that we can give each one just the one-on-one, face-to-face attention they need is so worthwhile, even for our future happiness. Because if we take care of some of these things early on, it does actually mean less worry for us later. So
right,
if we parent, there's so many people now who are parenting their grandchildren, and maybe if they'd, obviously we don't have any control over the outcome. It's all in the hands of God. But sometimes I think, maybe if you'd have slowed your life down when your kids were little, they'd have been functional enough to parent their own kids.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. Amen. The next question rolls right in. Do you have any tips for staying connected with multiple children? Like, how do you build in that one-on-one time or any rhythms to keep the bond strong? Like, especially when you have that first kid that's being homeschooled, the middle child, and then the baby.
Yeah. I spent most of my time with my kids. I wasn't big on like going places.
Hold on just a sec. You're back.
I have a time limit set for myself on social media and it went off. Basically I did my best to like take one child at a time on an errand, or, we didn't necessarily have tons of date nights or rhythms in that way, but we did do our best to spend one-on-one time individually. But also I'm so thankful that my adult children, I'm still in relationship with my adult children. And so now like we got to go visit my son who lives in New Jersey with his wife and spend some time with him. And he's one, I wish I could have spent many more hours with him as a child. I mean, each one of my children are so precious and so beloved. And I wish I could have spent so much more time with them as children. But thankfully, it's not over. I loved Susan Wise Bauer gave a talk at a Wild and Free conference a few years ago. And she kind of talked about that, how she recognized that she might have made mistakes in the past, but her time with her children was not over. And so I'm very thankful that, one of my sons is coming down with his wife and child this weekend, and I can just like dote on those kids.
Yes.
My other son's coming the following weekend. So every chance I get to just love and listen to my children is so important, even though I maybe wish I could have had more of that earlier on.
Yes.
But thankfully it's not over.
Yes, it's not over till the fat lady sings. You're
Right.
being a mom when they're 18 and move out.
It's true. It's true.
Yes, I love how this, I feel like our previous generation and the generations now onward are beginning to grasp that you're not done because they've left your house. You're not a free agent. You are a mom. That is your title from now on. It's not something that you put on and take off.
Yeah, and I don't think we'd want to. Like my own mother, I mean, she has some regrets of her own from her childhood, but she's still spending time with us and calling us and making time to be with us. So I think, thankfully, we're never done. Thankfully, we get to continue to be in relationship with these beautiful people. And especially I feel like when we homeschool, we just like them so much more. Like we have so many shared interests. I was having my book club last night and my adult daughter came out and someone was asking her about art. And I was like, I felt like I was watching a show, like a movie star, or Jordan Peterson or something, like hearing the brilliant thoughts out of her mouth. And obviously I'm her mom, but it's like we get to still be in relationship and still love these kids even when they're adults. It's not just over.
Yes. I love that. That just, it's so exciting and relieving to me when right now we are going through issues where my oldest, he doesn't feel very connected to us. So he is acting out a whole lot. We had a 2-hour battle about cleaning up something that was really small, and he made it really huge. And it wasn't until after the fight that my husband and I, who thankfully works from home, and so he can come step in and whenever I need him,
Yeah.
realizing like, what, that's not characteristic. What's going on? And we realized he's kind of been put off to the side dealing with our middle, and relationally that has broken down a little bit. So now we're bolstering that. It's like you're constantly on the watch for when, because you are going to fail as a parent. It's just happen, and just being on the watch for, okay, adjusting the where you're going each.
Right. And the important thing is that you don't judge yourself. Like I think as moms, it's really important. I only have 5 minutes, but I think as moms, it's really important that we forgive ourselves, because we're gonna, like it would be easy for you in that situation to be like, oh, I totally screwed up. I didn't give this one enough attention. And then sort of get in your head or get down on yourself and not have the power to move forward. But I think as mothers, it's very crucial that we also take time to forgive ourselves, because if we hold ourselves in judgment, we're not going to be able to love well. We're going to be kind of messy about it or manipulative or something. So you're just taking the time to say, I wish I could have done better, but I forgive myself. I thank you, God, that you've forgiven me. And, and just keep moving on, because these are all little things. You know what I mean? God's going to work it out in the end. You see even so many stories of people who really had rough lives or made a lot of mistakes, and their moms just kept praying for them and things turned around. So I think our faithfulness will make a difference, even if there are times that are hard.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Well, thank you so much. I want to open up the comments. If you have any questions, go ahead and pop that in really quick. We have 3 minutes. So pop it in really quick. We'll try to address them really quick. But Jennifer, is there anything you're working on right now that you want to tell us about? Anything you're excited about? Sales that are maybe going on in your store?
Yeah, anybody who's watching today can use the code NEWFRIEND for 10% off. And I did just release a New England guide. It's a sweet guide with you could read a pilgrim story and make it kind of a Thanksgiving or early America guide. But there's also a few other suggested literature selections. So it's a really sweet new release called the New England Guide in my shop.
Awesome. Thank you. I don't see any extra questions. I did see a question, but I think we addressed it at one point. So thank you so much for your time. And for
it was a real joy and honor to get to chat with all of you today. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen.
Thank you so much. Oh, we have
so I think that Nourishing Nature Kindergarten is perfect, because there is a companion chapter book, and it does, if you have an older child, and someone, a 7-year-old boy, even so, it's a kindergarten. It says Nourishing Nature Kindergarten. But the picture books, the activities are wonderful. There's a lot of natural history in them. And then if they're older, like a 7-year-old, if you're doing it with a 5 and 7-year-old or something, maybe just add a little more phonics or spelling or math for that older child. But it also has chapter book companions, so you can just read those in morning time and adapt that so that you're still doing that literature based and motor skills strong. Especially I think boys maybe need a little bit more time with motor skills. They're so they learn so well through movement. So I think that's important.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. Again, just cannot thank you enough for your wonderful book. Those who are just popping on or looking afterward, please buy her book. It was wonderful. We have all just gobbled it up. We could not put it down. It was so refreshing. Your honesty and your openness. I felt like there was nothing you weren't willing to talk about, and that is so refreshing in motherhood, and it's such a needed thing. So thank you for being in this space with us.
Oh, it's an honor. It really is. Thanks for hosting this today.
I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.